Welcome to Conversations with Catalysts. I'm your host, Jeremy West.
Today I have with me Dr. Amanda Hellman. Welcome, Dr. Amanda.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. It's an honor to be here and talking with you.
Thank you. Well, let's begin. Can you just give me and my listeners just a little bit of an overview of who is Dr. Amanda Hellman and how did you end up in the world of coaching?
Yeah, so I got into the world of coaching. Honestly, it's been a journey to get here. I started off with a passion always since three years old of teaching. So I went to get my graduate, master's, and basically PhD in education, special education, and was in that field. And later got, leadership degree, avoided counseling like the plague, didn't think that would be a good fit, although people thought that would be great, and eventually got my counseling master's. And then during COVID, like right before COVID hit, I wrote a book. I had a children's book out, but I started to write my memoir, a story about my life and healing of after trauma. And during that time, I started, really focusing on business, learning entrepreneurship skills, and I ended up getting a coach. And I just had a lot of people encourage me to do coaching. And ironically, I had been an education consultant and coach for 7 or 8 years after getting my PhD. So I knew how to coach. I naturally am a coach, empowerment person, always encouraging people. So that's really what happened is I, took 2 or 3 years from 2020 to 2022. And then I dove head first into coaching for the last 2.5 years. And that's cognitive release coaching was birthed. So that's really my story that led me to the coaching today.
You mentioned your master's. What's your doctorate in?
Special education. So basically my master's and my PhD was all in special education, but then later I went back to school and got my master's in counseling education or counseling psychology about 2 years ago. So that was an additional master's. And it wasn't like I wanted, basically I needed it for some other things, such as like the coping skills, the healthy skills, and just really for me to understand it. And I really didn't plan on doing it, but I realized, that it was a necessity for the work I would do later.
You're worse than me. I got a bachelor degree. I started a master's that I didn't finish, and then I got another bachelor degree. But yeah, going back for a master's after a doctorate, that's crazy.
Luckily, not another PhD, because some people told me that. And
Yeah.
I don't know about having 2 PhDs, but I do know somebody who did 3 PhDs, Jeremy,
Oh my God.
together. And I was like, no.
So I was thinking about doing a PhD in psychology because when I took my Bachelor of Psychology, it just fascinates me so much that I was like, oh man, I just love studying this so much. I'll just get a PhD and just get paid for studying it. Then I did the honors thesis, which was only 9,000 words, and it drove me nuts writing an academic language. And I decided if I was going to do anything, I was going to translate academic stuff into regular English for everybody else. And yeah, anyway, I was talking to my psychologist yesterday, and he said, "Oh yeah, someone told me once, no, something about if I ever think of doing a PhD, then shoot me or something like that." But anyway,
it is some work. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about once you went into coaching. Well, it sounds like you've really been doing it for 10 or more years, but once you started calling yourself a coach officially, who are your clients? Tell me a little bit about what your clients are like.
Yeah. So I typically work with a lot with women who may have, they may have like need confidence, women who want to find their voice. But I've also worked with a lot of business women who are still finding their voice, or have transition where, like me, they started in one area of education or maybe marketing and now they're going into business, right? Or now they know they have something else that they want to do. And so it's really building up women in confidence, helping them shift and release their old negative mindsets. So the primary audience I serve are women. However, I do also work with teens. I've had some teens, and in fact, what's been really interesting is I've had some teens, 14, 15-year-olds, and in 1 year and 2 sessions with me, because we talk a lot about beliefs and changing them, she stopped all self-harm. She's probably been sober for like she called the Sober app. And she's been like maybe 6 months after working with me, she told me, she was like, oh my gosh, two sessions in with you, I shifted my beliefs. And that happens with women too. They may have beliefs of I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I have to get it right. And it's been 20 years of that belief system. And just, the work that I do to help rewire their brain, maybe usually after one session, and then maybe a second session, they're done. Like, it's not, they don't believe that anymore. We really look at those belief systems and we do the work, the techniques to help them do that. And then I've also worked with men. I've had quite a few men that I've also had wanting their voice, really wanting to shift their beliefs, deal with relationships, communication, really investing in themselves, shifting their financial beliefs and mindset. So I've had quite a bit of men, but again, Jeremy, my primary audience is women, but I do also work with teens and men. They've certainly worked with me and had a lot of breakthroughs as well.
So it sounds like maybe, any marketing you do is sort of aimed at women, but then there are men and teens that come to you as well going, wait, can you help me?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, there are. It's primarily for women, and a lot of times I do talk about finding your voice, so if I'm on media, I tend to talk about, what do you need to unlock? And in fact, I don't have it out yet, Jeremy, but I wrote a book, from all the hundreds of clients I've coached, and it's all about beliefs. So it's like the 20 top beliefs that men, women, and children, really humans, think, and it's really to break down the barriers, because so many times I think we feel silent in our thoughts and our beliefs, and we don't realize how many people actually have the same belief. And if we could just break that barrier, then we won't be alone and we won't feel ashamed, and we actually could reach out for help a lot more.
That's fascinating. So can you tell me, we don't have time to go through the top 20 beliefs, but what about the
Yeah.
top 2 or 3?
Yeah, so one of the top beliefs that both men and women have identified is I have to get it right. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
pressure to perform and be perfect. It's the pressure of I have to get this right. And usually it's the crux of it is, well, I fear that people are going to, not validate me. I fear that I'm, going to be seen in a bad light, or I feel that people are going to reject everything I've done, right? Whether I'm an author or if I'm a speaker. And so what happens is it drives people into a performance and they get burnt out because the function of it, right? We want to do things with excellence, but perfection is not excellence. That's one of my favorite quotes that I share with people. It's more of, okay, how do I do things well, but not at the expense of myself?
Perfection is not excellence. Tell me a little bit more about that.
All right.
What do you mean by perfection? Perfection is not excellence.
Yeah, so perfection is not excellence means to me that a lot of times we equate having perfection in something, that everything, all dots and I's, right? Like, that's important that we, check things and that we're thorough. But what happens is when we want everything to be perfect, we equate that with excellence. But to me, excellence is an ongoing iteration, right? So think about perfection. Excellence is me doing something, and then I have an opportunity to grow and learn from it and do it over and over again, and want to keep doing this until I find that something is working. But it's not at the expense of myself, my time, and having no balance. And so I think what happens, people equate my performance and having everything perfect as it's successful, when I believe that excellence is when you continue to be ongoingly experimenting and seeing how do things continue to get better, or how do I keep shifting and solve things. And it's an ongoing process where I can just be present and explore in it and not put so much pressure on myself.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. And do you find that often the expectation that people place on themselves of being perfect means that they don't even get started?
So one part of perfection, and I have to get it right, is that people avoid the task. For example, I work with a lot of authors, and they might avoid it. They may write something and then keep editing, right? So chapter 8, you could have 8 chapters, but instead I have chapter 1 8 times because I was editing, that. And so what happens is that happens, right? Where you just shut down and you don't do anything, or you continuously do something to the point where you're editing or you're doing something for 20 hours, and it takes so much time out of your schedule, out of your brain, and your body gets stressed, because you're doing too much, you're overachieving so much. and then you don't want to make mistakes, and you make mistakes, and then you shut down because you're like, oh no, I can't get it right. You see, it's like the cycle of either overdoing it and then making mistakes and then feeling like the pressure of doing it even more, or shutting down and doing nothing.
Yeah, and I find that often we do our best work unconsciously. So if you're doing 20 hours straight of trying to consciously work on something, it'd be much better to take some rest and then come back to it, and it'll just come a lot easier than just continuously trying to consciously work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So
Well, that's the
what
first
would you
one.
say? What's that? Yeah, that's the first one. What's the second one?
I would say I am good enough or I am enough. It's all semantics based, but feeling enough is a hard thing for people, men and women. And I actually particularly hear that a lot from men, I am enough. And so that can lead into, again, right, some overwork. It's different than I have to get it right. It's just feeling like you never measure up, right? Like you constantly have to do things, but it's more of a measuring up thing. And it could also make you feel like you're not valuable, right? So not being enough has to do with your value. So you might feel like you have to do all these things externally, rather than internally knowing who you are. Pleasing people, extra, constantly saying yes to things that you don't have to, right? Just so that you can be enough, or trying to fill your time so that you can be approved.
Right. So, okay. Well, I was just going to say King Gene has sent a voice memo. King Gene, just so you know, at the end of this, after about half an hour conversation, we will listen to and respond to listener clips. What would you say, Amanda, is the core philosophy behind your coaching, and how does that translate into tangible results for clients?
Good, great question. The core philosophy for me is getting at what are the thoughts or what are your beliefs, right? Even if with I'm not enough, what are the other things that you begin thinking that ends up becoming a weight in your brain, and it leads to you stopping everything you're doing or leaving dreams behind or ideas because of your thinking. And so I essentially help people to, cognitive release is the easiest way to say it. It's kind of funny, but it's true. Is think of a toilet flushing, right? You get rid of all of that overload of stuff, and you're releasing all of the junk, right? Or all of the thoughts that get in the way of your creativity, of your dreams, of your vision. And so I help people get to those unconscious, because sometimes I meet with people like, oh, I've dealt with these different beliefs, and they're floored when they work with me, and they're like, oh my gosh, all these things are coming up, and I haven't really addressed it. Because we really get to those subconscious, I really get to the belief systems to help them rewire their brain. So my philosophy is, let's get to all the things that you don't always share, you don't sit down and actually think about, so we can release that so that you can move forward. And the results will be peace, a lot more peace, confidence, clarity and vision, and really just alignment within yourself. You really know who you are, you're grounded, and you feel confident to step out, to speak, to write, to be creative, and get the results you want in areas of finances, business, or anything that you want to put your mind to.
So basically, you help people with their brain's digestive system.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And
I like,
flush
right?
out
It
all the
is.
crap so that you can, yeah, have a healthy mind and move forward and
Yeah.
accomplish your dreams because you've been able to get rid of all the crap.
Yeah, right. I know, right? I'm literally writing a book on that too, which is kind of funny. So that's why I have that language. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is. I'm really helping
Do
you
you
get
have a
through the
title for
stuff.
the book?
Well, not yet. It's funny. I have all the titles within the book, but I do have like basically it's about like, emotional regularity. I don't know if that'll be the ending title, but it's more of like, how can you get regulated so that you can
Emotional
actually.
regularity, like regularity of the digestive
Yes.
system.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So
Great.
plan words.
I love it.
Yeah. So just, look out for that book. It'll probably make you laugh, but it might also make you think.
Good thing. And you said you've just finished another book that you haven't published yet?
Yes, I know. I have quite a bit. So
Does that one have a title?
that one is Breaking Belief. It's a working title until I get it published,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's Breaking Belief Barriers. So it's all
Okay.
about the top 20 beliefs that hold you back, that you need to break that hold you back so you can move forward, or something, to that effect.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, so You've already shared one about the teenager. Could you just give us maybe another success story where your coaching made a big difference in a client's life or career?
Yes. So I have one client, there's been multiple results for her. The first one is after one session, she had been through a lot of different situations and circumstances where, a lot of depressions where she never had her voice. And after one session, she actually gained her voice back, started going live, started looking at herself, started to love herself, started her business. And she started to, we had goals and she surpassed it. She started to, her cookie business, but she went from like zero to like probably $1,000 per month, and continues to shift and flourish that. She got all of her certifications for the kitchen. She started to have a partnership with a bank where they've been selling her cookies there. And she also started to go on podcasts. She was on, I have a podcast of my own, but she went on it, and she's starting to write her book and share her story. And so there's been so many changes for her, in that confidence and finding her voice. And when I first met her, she didn't have her voice. She didn't feel confident. She felt so trapped in, like, there's so many dreams and, what ifs. And now she's actually moving forward in all the dreams and the goals that she wants to accomplish.
It's so fascinating. I wonder where this world would be if everybody had a coach. 'Cause all these people out there with all these
Yeah.
creative ideas, or maybe the creative ideas are even trapped. They're not even conscious yet. But then there's definitely people with creative ideas who just don't feel like they're good enough to make it happen or whatever. Wow, the world would be a whole different place.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. And it's true, right? Like I agree. I think everybody needs a counselor, right, or a coach. And counseling is very different than coaching, but having a coach for dreams and moving forward, or something, because a coach need a coach, right? I'll never stop having people that help me,
Yeah.
and it is, there is a mindset and investment in it, but you do move forward when you have people that not only you keep yourself accountable, but other people are helping you move past your blind spots and helping you go past your current limits or even things that you don't realize are limitations. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the difference between sort of psychology, counseling, and coaching is basically psychology is, at least at the moment, is still focused on getting people out of mental illness to just neutral, and then coaching, although we will deal with trapped emotions and stuff from the past, but it's more looking toward the future and more on the positive psychology side, which is over the last 20 years or so becoming more popularly studied within psychology itself and psychology research. But I think coaches are at the forefront of moving people from neutral to, like, from, let's say, psychology is moving you from -10 to 0, and then coaching is moving you from 0 to 10. What happened with me is I kept getting counseling and getting to 0. That wasn't good enough for me, and I was getting depressed just because I didn't have direction until I found a coach. I found, wow, that's what I needed. That's my problem. I didn't need more psychology counseling. I needed some coaching to move forward.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I agree. And I do. I think that there are some emotional elements of coaching, but I always tell my clients it's more like a slingshot, right? Like I bring you back to, like, shift whatever needs to shift from, whatever belief you had that could be linked to your past. And then you get to slingshot forward. So it's like quicker. We're not, staying back there. That's not the purpose of coaching. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. I very much believe, I hope I haven't come across in the, like 17, 18 episodes as being anti-psychology. I'm as in like psychological counseling. I very much believe in it when it's needed. I think that it can be overdone to the point where people are actually strengthening the neural connections to the negativity in their past by talking about it over and over again, when really what they need to do now is move toward the future. So yeah, anyway.
No, I agree. No, I agree. I don't think it was
I'm not
negative. I
down
think,
talking it, but I also think that coaching is valuable once you get to a certain point. How do you help a client identify and unlock their potential, especially when they're unaware of it themselves?
yeah. So typically when it comes to beliefs, I when I work with the client, we look at some of their beliefs and pain points, and we identify some of the views, such as like, I'm not enough. And from that, there's the reframing, and it's really looking at activating different parts of your brain, the logic, the emotional, the vision. What I do then
I
is
lost you for a second there. You just
okay.
said vision, and then I lost you for.
Okay, so vision, and then let me think, logic, vision, emotion, and then also just looking at, how do I take action? So different parts of the brain, I help them think of, well, once you're past some of these beliefs, how would life look, right? So we're starting to look at and that could be hard, because if you're always thinking from the viewpoint of like, I'm not enough and all that stuff, it may take a moment for you to be like, well, what would that be like if I didn't have that, right? What would it feel like emotionally if I didn't have that? So I start helping activate and unlock the brain, so they start thinking about what they really want to feel. And then once we go through, which I call the cognitive release map, that helps them rewire their brain. So once they totally shift from, okay, I am actually enough, or they start believing it, I'm like, okay, so now that you are believing this, right? We're partnering with that, and you actually do believe it. They don't have that weight of the past. Then we start looking at, okay, what was your vision, right? What's one step you can take towards your dream, right? So we kind of look at what is your actual goal, and then what's one small step, because the brain needs simple, right? So if I'm wanting to write a book, right, I can be overwhelmed, but it's like, well, what's my first step? One of my first steps might just be, within this week, I'm going to, identify a title, right? Or I'm going to write a simple outline, for chapter one. So I help them break down into a simple step that's possible, right? Based on their baseline if they have nothing. And so that's the way that we can unlock a potential, because, it's not only locking potential, but they're actually taking action towards it, which makes it more, from potential to action, right? To the actual reality of their dreams.
100%. Yeah. Once you've got, in this example, something down on paper, that that's infinite difference from nothing. What are some common challenges that you've noticed over the last 3-4 years that you've been officially calling yourself a coach? What are some common challenges that your clients face, and how do you help them through those obstacles?
Great question. Common obstacles would be, once the belief system is shifted, then it's okay, how do I, because once the belief is shifted, okay, I have my goal. If they get stuck in their goal, typically if we get stuck in a goal, right? So if my goal, for example, is I'm going to write 3 times a week and they're not, then what I typically do is say, I'm like, okay, well, is it avoidance, right? Is it that, time management, like what's going on, focus, like did something happen? But typically, if none of those things are happening, or if they are, then I'm like, okay, well, then we go back to that belief thing, right? We're like, okay, well, what is it, the same belief? Is there something more to that? Which usually there is, some other underlying belief. Or we dive deeper, so we get to like, okay, you already dealt with this event, right? Or this thing was holding you back, and maybe the next thing was, okay, like I didn't realize it, but I had this thing that happened to me in high school, and I didn't think I was a great writer, so now all of a sudden I feel like I can't do that because I get to this point and then I stop, right? So it's a
Right.
memory from the past that, again, right, we shift that belief. So a lot of times what I find is the challenge is we get through beliefs, but then there might be something deeper. And that's why I say I pull up the roots. I'm Healthy Roots. That's my coaching business. And we got to get to the root of it and uproot the whole root, right? So that you can actually have your new thinking and go forward. And so I guess that's one of the biggest things is I always know that behind someone not moving forward is that there's still beliefs that are holding them back, and you have to get to all the different factors that are contributing to it. And it doesn't have to take forever, but we want to get to it so that you can actually completely pull it out. Because if you think about it, old trees, and that's like probably one of my favorite premises. A tree is like a brain, right? So when you have an old tree and you haven't taken out all the roots from the ground and you try to plant a new tree in that same place, it won't happen. And so we actually have to get all the roots uprooted, or it can impact my client, somebody later. So I find that if clients start to go back into something where they stop it, it's always a belief. So that's usually where we start, and that's usually how we break through.
So it's it's almost always something deeper in the roots. And then, so then your clients would generally, it sounds like you together, or you'd have them come up with some kind of homework. Have they chosen, I'm going to write 3 times a week?
Yeah, so typically I'll have them identify something, and if it's something lofty, for example, right, if you're in perfection, you may say, oh, I have to write 5 or 6 hours a day, right, for 3 times a week. And I say, okay, where are you now? Right. So we kind of work through what's practical, what will feel good and what's intentional, because sometimes we forget the practical and intentional. And if you want to go from 0 to 6 hours, kind of like a marathon, if you haven't ran at all and you want to run 13 miles, it's probably going to be really hard. Like you may not make that goal because it's too much. So I do help them set those goals, in a great way. And I do help them think about what are the small steps in between to get there. And that usually is very helpful because, I'm all about practical, I'm all about simple, and the brain is. So, when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's part of it. And then if they had something like I am not enough for their deeper dive, resource that I give them, it's always related to whatever we were focused on. So if it is about not being enough, I do have a coaching reflection that I adapt for each of the beliefs. Sometimes I do have like a questionnaire or questions I give them. Sometimes it's a different activity that I help them go through some more cognitive mapping, or really shift in their brain skill. Sometimes it's, helping them identify a schedule, right? If we went through it to continue to do that, or extension of one of the things we've did so that they can go back and review it. So it really is tailored to the person, their brain style, their thinking style, and what they want to get out of the sessions, and depending on the topic that we're focused on.
Excellent. Well, it's okay. Let me just ask you one other question here. What is one piece of wisdom that either you or some other people have noticed that you're constantly sharing with anyone who will listen?
Sure. I think my biggest wisdom is probably in my life. I've done it because I'm the type of coach that I model what I say. I'm not going to tell you that I'm doing things that I'm not doing. And so the biggest thing for me is that it's a daily practice. Where am I at with my thinking? What are some of the blockers? And I take time each day. It's part of my routine, part of my lifestyle, really more than routine, of checking in, with me. Okay, so where are some of my goals? Am I accomplishing them? And so I always tell people that taking time each day to think about what you're thinking about, which is metacognition, which is pretty much what I do in coaching for people and help them do. When you stop and think about what you're thinking about, it's going to help you to really take the time to identify, reveal, heal, and release the thought patterns, the beliefs, and even the emotions that are holding you back so that you can actually do your goals. So, my biggest thing is think about what you're thinking about so that you can move forward. That would be my, in a nutshell, statement.
So how much time each day do you devote to that?
Right now, like I have different segments because I feel like for regularity, right? Because we were talking about that emotional regularity. I feel like it could be like 2 to 5 minutes, in the
Yeah.
morning, every couple hours. And there's intentional things I do to really check in, right? So it doesn't have to take hours long. There are different practices I have, with writing. But when I notice that I'm feeling more anxious or stressed, then I know there's something going on with my beliefs. What is going on? What am I thinking about? And what's causing that stress? And what am I believing in the moment?
So that 2 to 5 minute brain poop each morning, are there certain
I love
questions you
that.
ask yourself, or are there
Right? I
certain
mean,
questions you ask yourself, or what's the practice?
yeah, good question. So, depending, as the cognitive release map, right? So it's kind of a visual type thing. But if you're like thinking you're not enough, right? And people usually get the statements in their belief systems, I usually may say, okay, let's say, for example, how about recently or last year, I was going through, okay, I deserve great things, but I didn't believe that, right? There was something that was tied to certain things with my value, right? And I didn't know that statement was there, and it was a high pain point. So what I did was I took a moment and I was like, okay, like I said, I deserve great things. And I sat in that. I didn't write it out. I said it. And I wanted to feel in my body, in my mind, is that painful, right? And that was like a high 10 pain point. So after that, then I took a moment And I identify, well, what are their beliefs? Like, why did I believe that? Right. So I don't deserve great thing. Okay. Like, I wasn't valuable at this time. Right. Or this happened. And I started to think of other beliefs, like I might not be good enough or this stuff, right? Like I'm not valuable. And those things were like other branches to that. And so I started to identify those and I was like, well, what do I really want to believe, right? Why would I deserve great things? And I started to write out what I really wanted, my power statements of what I really want to believe, right? And I didn't have the emotional capacity for those yet, but I still did that. And then I started to use like techniques such as, like I'll visualize, okay, well, what do I need to give away, right? Like this is just a simple one. I have many, but a simple one might be, okay, well, what do I need to give away, right? Or release, to somebody, or maybe put in the garbage, right, if you will, visually, and release that. And so I
The
started to do
toilet.
that. And then after that, it's more of like I say it again. I'm like, I deserve great things. And I see, is the emotional distress as high? Did it get lower, right? Did it shift? And then if that is, and usually it does, but if it's a little lower, I know that there's still more processing and I might do it later that day, right? Or I might do that same activity or one of the 20, different things depending on what's going on that I use, for it. But that's one that I think is more, simple, that helps my brain know, okay, I can give a little bit away, or it's okay to kind of see, what am I really thinking? Because I think we try to shy away from the negative, but honestly, when you reveal things that are negative, it's to heal. When you try to hide the negative, it's really hard to heal because you're not really, you're not uncovering it. And so I found that like when I uncover the things I'm really thinking, it helps me actually move forward.
That's fantastic. I really love your analogy of, the digestive system because, yeah, generally, if you're regular, you're going once a day at least. So, and it reminds me of Zig Ziglar, an old motivational speaker. He said sometimes or often people would say to him, oh, this motivation stuff is great, but it doesn't last. And he'd say something like, yeah, neither does showering. That's why we recommend doing it daily.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah, let's just listen to this message from King Gene.
Shout out to the room. Great show, great topic, great insight. One question would be, what would be the foundations of how perfection is measured?
Good question. Do you have anything for that, Dr. Amanda?
Yeah, that's a great question, King Gene, and thanks for waiting for an answer. I would say it not that it so the answer will vary depending on what the perfection is, right? So for example, perfection, if it's about writing, right, there might be scales of like, how are you thinking? So for me, for perfection, it's like I have to get it right. So I typically have you identify, why are you thinking you have to get it right? So 10 is a high pain point, 0 not, right? Or I have to perform to get X, to hear XYZ. And so, usually my scale is like from a 0 to a 10, where I help you identify when you say it, is it painful because you don't believe it? Is it painful because, emotionally it brings up something, or you're in it? So, that's kind of like my range for like how to identify that. And for some people, right, because some people are more logical or emotional or they don't like scales, I usually say, okay, low, medium, high, right? So like, when it comes to a certain area, whether it be creating or writing, or maybe you have a dream or vision or business idea, what is the area that is holding you back? And then we get to like, what is your statement, right? What is the deep core belief you have about perfection, and how does that make you feel? And that range is what I usually go by for that, because once you identify that and once we do the work, then that perfection will definitely shift that belief. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I look at it, is like, how high of a pain point is it when you say it, when we start versus when we end. And it really depends on each area that we're dealing with perfection.
Thank you, Dr. Amanda. And King Gene, if you have any follow-up to that, you can put it in while I'm asking two final questions of Dr. Amanda, and we'll follow up after that. So, Dr. Amanda, these last two questions are really just to make sure that we've covered as much as we can in the hour. So if your answer is no to either one of them, that's perfectly fine. And if you have something, that's good as well. So number one, is there anything that we started talking about that you didn't get to say as much as you wanted to because we headed off on a different direction and had a little tangent?
I don't know that I did. I think we really addressed, a lot of the cores, such as core beliefs, and I went over the top two. And if you missed, if any of you missed that, you might want to go back and listen. But I talked about, the two, if I have to get it right and I'm enough, and even some examples. So I feel very confident with being able to answer in your excellent questions, Jeremy.
Thank you, thank you. And is there anything about you, your philosophy, and your work? So your philosophy and your work that I didn't even know to ask that you would think would be a glaring omission when it comes to a survey of the life and work of Dr. Amanda Hellman?
That is a good question. Now that when you're asking it that way, I think the biggest core, I talked about philosophy, but I would say the biggest thing I want people to feel in my presence at all times is feeling safe, right? Safety is key, feeling loved, seen and heard. I think those are big values for people. And what I've also found is that I want to make sure when it comes to coaching or even just having conversations with people that I'm present, but that it's a good fit for myself and for them. Like there's so many different amazing coaches out there, and I know, right, that I really help people with results and outcomes and shift their beliefs. But I also know that I'm not the only person, right, that can bring that. And I know that each coach brings something unique. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I love to do is empower people, but I want people to take that moment, to take those times to stop and actually sometimes you have to sit in some things, and then through that you get to release that and you come out and say, wow, the greatest thing for me is watching in like a session, having people come in and being like, oh my gosh, like, not feeling like I'm enough, like I felt that my whole life, and then they identify other statements with it, and in 20 minutes, depending on the person, it's it. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe those statements. And they're totally shocked, and then they can actually start moving forward and they don't have that old weight of I'm not enough. They start, speaking, they start being confident, they start realizing their worth. And to me, there's no money that can buy the countenance of people's faces or even them shifting and seeing them go from this like heaviness of life to starting to be like a tree of life, to start thriving, and it's just from these shifts in beliefs that they didn't even realize they had.
It is absolutely amazing how quickly some of these coaching techniques can make these kinds of changes in belief systems, and it needs to be studied a lot more in the field of psychology. I actually have a psychologist, I had a psychologist a number of years ago who used these coaching techniques, and when I first started talking to him on our first session, I asked something about if he was going to send a letter to my doctor or something. And he said, oh, that's normally after 6 sessions. And I don't normally need that long with people. And I was like, oh my God, what an arrogant prick or whatever. But with these sort of coaching techniques within 1 session, everything had changed in my belief system. So it's amazing how much quicker these, and again, psychology is great. If you're mentally ill, go see a psychologist. However, sometimes what you're needing is actually this positive moving forward and dropping those old beliefs, which can be done quite quickly sometimes. Dr. Amanda, what was I going to say? Oh, yes, you just said that, yeah, you're not the only one. There's lots of different coaches out there. That's the thing. In psychology research, there was a study several years ago where they pitted the 4 or 5 top different models of psychological counseling against each other to see which one did the best, and there was no significant difference. They all did just as well as each other. But what they did find was that when there was a good therapist-client alliance, that was when there was success and people had changed. So that's why I'm doing this podcast, because 2 reasons. Number one, everyone can listen and glean something out of all the different kinds of coaches and all the different modalities and whatever. However, the second reason is so people can hear the coaches have conversation and see who they mesh with, people who are actually looking for a coach. So for those who have heard you today, Dr. Amanda, and they're like, I need her in my life to help me move forward, how do they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, and it's www.healthyrootsllc.com.
Sorry,
And
can you spell that? Healthy
yeah,
Root,
so healthy,
ROOT?
yeah, so healthy and then roots, ROOTS, LLC.com.
HealthyRootsLLC.com.
Yep. So I have a website, and then my email is simply amanda@healthyrootsllc.com.
Fantastic. Anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah, and I do have clarity calls, so if you ever were interested, I usually have a survey, or form, but I do have 30 minutes where people can meet with me, and identify some things, what's going on, like what do you want? And I share like some of what I do and, see if it's a good fit. And so that's something complimentary for people because I really am a big believer that I want to meet the person, meet me, and see if that is a good fit before you move forward and really start to build, that trust and see how is that relationship. Because like you said, that relationship is so key, and it's important that both people, find that to be a good fit to move forward.
Fantastic. And I'll cut this out if I'm wrong, but I believe from seeing some of your stuff on YouTube, you're a Christian and do you work with Christians more than anybody else, or?
Yeah, so I am a Christian, but I do work with people of all backgrounds. I tend to have a lot of Christian women because I work with a lot of authors, but all of my degrees are from secular places. I've always worked in the secular, workforce, and I've had people of all different backgrounds, of all different beliefs that I've worked with, and they've all found really great results. So I'm open to people of all kinds of different backgrounds.
Excellent. So I just wanted to point that out. So if
Yep.
anybody that feels that you've messed with Dr. Amanda, great. I just wanted to point that out in case you're a Christian, then you may especially want to contact Dr. Amanda. When they're a Christian, does that come into your coaching?
So I usually ask people, I say that I could work in either faith-based or, not. And so I always check in with people, to see what they're
Yeah,
comfortable with and what they prefer. And I think that's important, because wherever you are in your journey, I want to honor that. And I'm able to still use my techniques because I have, education background as well as, I just have very different background. So I find that I can work with people of all kinds of different backgrounds.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Dr. Amanda. That was
Yep.
a fantastic conversation, and I hope that I talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me. Take
I
care.
forgot to say my links are all found at jeremywest.net, including the link to this podcast. Thank you, Dr. Amanda.
Thank you. Take care.